In a world that celebrated chrome, glass, and silent electric power, Leo Sterling's garage was an anachronism. It smelled of motor oil, hot metal, and the quiet dignity of honest work. His hands, permanently etched with the ghosts of grease and grime, were instruments of profound understanding. They could read the language of a struggling engine, diagnose the ailment in a faltering transmission, and coax life back into machines others had abandoned. He was a mechanic, a single father, a man whose world was contained within the four walls of his modest shop and the bright, boundless love he held for his 7-year-old daughter, Mia. She sat now at a small, clean table in the corner, her crayons building a world far more colorful than his own, her presence the silent engine that powered his life. Miles away, in a tower that pierced the clouds, Eleanor Vance commanded a different kind of world. Her office was a sterile expanse of white marble and panoramic glass, her desk an altar to ruthless efficiency. Her hands, flawlessly manicured, signed contracts that shifted markets and dictated the futures of thousands. She saw the world as a system to be optimized, a series of inputs and outputs where sentiment was a rounding error and human fallibility a bug to be patched. Her latest triumph, the Vance Hyperion, a supercar powered by a revolutionary proprietary engine, was more than a vehicle. It was a statement of her dominance, a gleaming testament to her belief that perfection could not only be achieved but mass-produced. She felt nothing of the loneliness that echoed in her minimalist penthouse, only the sharp, cold thrill of ambition. Today, at the grand unveiling, the world would see her perfection made manifest. The Hyperion sat on a raised platform under the convention center's dazzling lights, a predator carved from carbon fiber and ambition. Eleanor, poised and radiating authority, delivered a speech about the future, about innovation, about a world remade in her company's image. The crowd, a mix of journalists, investors, and industry rivals, was rapt. And now, she declared, her voice crisp, witness the sound of progress. She pressed a button on her tablet. A low hum was supposed to build into a powerful, refined roar. Instead, a sickening clank echoed through the hall, followed by a high-pitched whine and a plume of acrid smoke. The engine died. A wave of shocked silence, then a ripple of whispers and camera flashes, washed over the stage. Her engineers, the best money could buy, swarmed the car, their faces paling as their diagnostics tablets showed nothing but cascading errors. Humiliation, hot and public, settled on Eleanor's shoulders. She saw Leo and Mia at the edge of the crowd, drawn in by the spectacle. Mia tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. The shiny car is crying. Eleanor's gaze, sharp as broken glass, fell upon Leo's grease-stained work shirt. In her desperation and fury, she saw not a man, but a symbol of everything she disdained. The analog, the common, the dirty. "You," she snapped, pointing at him. "You look like you know your way around an engine. Can you fix what my team of experts cannot?" The challenge hung in the air, thick with scorn. It was a public lashing, an attempt to deflect her own failure onto a nameless face in the crowd. Leo met her gaze, his expression unreadable. There was no anger, no fear, only a deep, quiet calm that seemed to absorb the tension around him. He looked at the smoking supercar, then at his daughter, who gave him a small, trusting nod. "I can try," he said, his voice even and steady. A murmur went through the crowd. Eleanor's security guards moved to block him, but she waved them off with a flick of her wrist. If she was going to be humiliated, she would make a spectacle of it. Let the simple mechanic try and fail. It would be a footnote in the disaster. Leo walked onto the stage, his worn work boots silent on the polished floor. He carried no tools, no diagnostic equipment. He simply placed a hand on the hood of the billion-dollar machine, closing his eyes as if listening to a secret. The engineers scoffed, their screens filled with incomprehensible data. "The quantum manifold has desynchronized," one muttered. "It's a catastrophic core failure." Leo ignored them. He walked to the side of the engine bay, his fingers tracing a line of cabling hidden deep within the chassis. He didn't look at the complex interface, he felt it. His brow furrowed for a moment. Then his eyes opened. He had found it. It was a flaw so minuscule, so elegantly simple in its destructive power, that no computer could have detected it. A harmonic resonance feedback loop in the tertiary fuel injector, caused by a specific alloy vibrating at a precise frequency only achievable at maximum electrical load, the kind used for a public unveiling. It was an error only the engine's original creator would ever anticipate. He reached into the bay, his calloused fingers finding a small calibration screw, no bigger than a grain of rice, that the production team had deemed obsolete. He gave it a quarter turn counterclockwise. "Try it now," he said, stepping back. Eleanor, her face a mask of disbelief, hesitantly tapped her tablet. The engine whirred, coughed once, and then roared to life. A perfect, powerful, soul-stirring sound. The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. Eleanor Vance stood frozen, her entire worldview of data, wealth, and expertise shattered by a man in a dirty shirt who had fixed the unfixable with nothing more than his hands and a single, knowing touch. That night, sleep offered Eleanor no escape. The image of the mechanic's hands, so sure and capable, haunted her. His quiet confidence was an indictment of her own brittle authority. She had built an empire on the principle of control, of knowing every variable, yet this man had understood her creation better than she or her entire company. It was impossible. It was infuriating. It was utterly captivating. At 3 a.m., she sent a single, encrypted message to her head of security. "Find out everything there is to know about the mechanic from the convention center. I want his history, his education, his last meal. Everything." The investigation was swift and clinical. By sunrise, a file lay on her marble desk. She opened it, expecting to find records of a trade school, a string of garage jobs, perhaps a minor criminal record. Instead, the first page made her breath catch in her throat. The man's name was Dr. Leo Sterling. He held a doctorate in mechanical engineering and theoretical physics from the world's most prestigious technology institute. Below his name was his last official title, Lead Propulsion Systems Architect, Sterling Innovations. He was the ghost, the legend who had vanished from the industry 5 years ago. He was the mind behind the very engine that powered the Hyperion, an early prototype he had designed before his abrupt and total disappearance from the corporate world. The file detailed his meteoric rise, his reputation as a purist, an artist among engineers. Then the timeline simply stopped. The final entry was a heavily redacted incident report, mentioning his wife, Dr. Era Sterling, and a catastrophic component failure during a test run at his former company. He hadn't just fixed her car. He had communed with a piece of his own soul. The next day, Eleanor drove not the resurrected Hyperion, but a nondescript sedan. She found Leo's garage tucked away on a street the city had forgotten. The scent of oil and steel felt more real than the filtered air of her office. Leo was underneath a vintage pickup truck, his voice a low murmur as he coached Mia, who was diligently tightening a bolt with a small wrench. He slid out when he saw Eleanor's expensive shoes on the concrete floor. He wiped his hands on a rag, his expression wary. "If you're here to offer me a job, I'm not interested," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "I'm not," Eleanor replied, her voice softer than she intended. "I'm here to understand." Just then, Mia ran up to her, holding out a piece of paper. It was a crayon drawing of the Hyperion, but this time it had a big, smiling face on its grill. "You made the sad car happy again," the little girl said, her earnestness a force of nature. Eleanor, who hadn't been handed anything but a contract or a lawsuit in a decade, knelt and took the drawing. The simple, unconditional kindness of the gesture cracked something deep inside her. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "Why did you leave?" she asked Leo, her voice thick with emotion. He hesitated, his gaze softening as he looked at his daughter. "The company I worked for, they knew there was a flaw in a component. A small risk, they said, an acceptable loss margin. My wife, Eris, was the lead test driver. That acceptable loss. It was her. The story settled in the quiet garage, a tragedy of corporate greed and personal integrity. He had walked away from it all, refusing to let his genius serve a system that valued profit over people. As Eleanor absorbed this, her phone buzzed with an urgent alert. A hostile takeover bid had just been launched against her company. The architect of the attack was a man she knew all too well, Marcus Thorne, her former fiancé and a ruthless corporate raider. The alert contained a detail that made her blood run cold. The attack was predicated on a rumor of critical instability in the Hyperion's core technology, a flaw Marcus couldn't possibly have known about unless he had orchestrated it himself. The realization hit Eleanor like a physical blow. The car's failure wasn't an accident. It was an attack. The public humiliation, the stock dip, it was all the first move in Marcus's brutal chess game. He had weaponized her greatest achievement against her. She looked at Leo, whose life had been shattered by the same brand of corporate immorality she was now facing. He was the one person on Earth who understood the technology and the ethics at play. He sabotaged it, she said, her voice a low whisper. Marcus. He must have. Leo looked at the complex diagnostic schematics she pulled up on her tablet. His eyes, accustomed to reading the secrets of machines, saw the faint, almost invisible fingerprints of digital intrusion. He'd need an inside man, someone with access to the core code. He had one, Eleanor admitted, a bitter taste in her mouth. A lead engineer I fired 2 months ago for cutting corners. Marcus must have hired him. She felt a wave of despair. She was being outmaneuvered, her company picked apart by the one man who knew all her weaknesses. I need your help, Leo, she said, the words costing her more pride than any business deal ever had. I can't fight him on his terms. But you understand the machine. You can find the proof. Leo's first instinct was to refuse. That world of betrayal and ambition had already taken everything from him. He had built a quiet life here, a sanctuary. But then he looked at Mia, who was watching them with wide, perceptive eyes. Daddy, she said simply, the lady is sad. You always say we should help people when they're sad. The child's simple, profound truth cut through his hesitation. This wasn't about returning to his old life. It was about upholding the values he was trying to teach his daughter. All right, he said, turning back to Eleanor. Let's see what your ex-fiancé has been up to. They started with the Hyperion's black box. Working in Leo's garage, surrounded by the honest clutter of his life's work, Eleanor felt a strange sense of peace. Using her resources, they accessed the encrypted data logs. Leo, navigating lines of code as if they were a familiar language, pointed to a ghost signature. There, he said, a backdoor. It routed a false sensor reading to the fuel regulator just before you started it. It was designed to cause the most spectacular failure possible. It was the smoking gun, but Marcus was too clever to be caught so easily. The code was firewalled, triple encrypted. They had the what but not the who. The next day, Marcus escalated his attack. A series of articles appeared in the financial press, citing anonymous sources from within Eleanor's company who questioned her leadership and the stability of her flagship technology. The narrative was clear. Eleanor Vance was a fraud, and her company was a house of cards. Her stock plummeted. Her board of directors called an emergency meeting. She was losing control, and Marcus knew it. That night, exhausted and defeated, Eleanor was back in Leo's garage. He's going to win, she said, slumping onto a stool. He's turning my own people against me. Leo was staring intently at the encrypted code on the monitor, his mind far away. He wasn't looking at the digital walls Marcus had built. He was looking for the secret door he himself had designed years ago. Every system has a failsafe, he murmured, more to himself than to her. A way for the creator to speak directly to the machine, to bypass the noise. He called it the Ghost Protocol. It was a master override he had embedded deep in the engine's firmware, an elegant string of code invisible to any standard diagnostic. It was his signature, a piece of him left in his creation. If I can activate it, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard, it will give us a direct line to the saboteur's entry point. It will show us everything. For hours they worked. Eleanor, with her knowledge of corporate network architecture, rerouted server access. Leo, with his intimate knowledge of the code, typed line after line of commands, coaxing his long-dormant protocol to life. Finally, a new window opened on the screen. The encryption dissolved. And there it was, the entire plot laid bare. It was worse than they imagined. The sabotage of the Hyperion was just phase 1. Marcus's mole had also planted a dormant virus in the car's software. A virus designed to spread through the company's network update. At the emergency shareholder meeting in 2 days, a meeting Marcus himself had forced, he planned to trigger it. The virus would simultaneously brick every Vanstech product on the market, from phones to home security systems, creating a global catastrophe. The final evidence was a recorded video call. Marcus, laughing, promising his mole a massive payout once he bought up Eleanor's company for pennies on the dollar. They had the proof, a digital bomb that would obliterate Marcus Thorne. But Eleanor knew it wasn't enough. Marcus was a master of plausible deniability. He would claim the data was fabricated, tie them up in legal battles for years, and use the media to paint her as a vengeful ex-lover. A quiet reveal to the board wouldn't work. They needed to detonate the bomb in public, in a way that was absolute and undeniable. "We can't just show them this," Eleanor said, her mind racing. The old, ruthless strategist in her reawakening, but now tempered with a new sense of justice. "We have to let him walk into his own trap." A plan began to form, a daring synthesis of Leo's technical genius and her corporate savvy. They wouldn't stop the attack. They would hijack it. "He's expecting to trigger a virus at the meeting," Leo said, catching her train of thought. "He'll be watching the system for signs of failure." "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. "So we give him what he wants to see. A flicker, a moment of panic. But instead of your code crashing our network," Leo finished the sentence, a slow smile spreading across his face, "my ghost protocol will take control of the main presentation screen and play his entire confession for the whole world to see. It was perfect. It was theatrical. It was just." For the next 48 hours, they prepared. Leo coded a sophisticated script that would lie in wait, ready to seize control of the convention hall's network the moment Marcus's trigger signal was detected. Eleanor, meanwhile, played her part, appearing publicly distraught and defeated, leaking information to Marcus's spies that she was preparing to resign at the meeting. She was baiting the trap with the one thing Marcus could never resist, the sight of her complete and utter failure. On the morning of the meeting, Leo put on a clean work shirt, the nicest one he owned. Mia hugged him tightly. "Go help the lady, Daddy," she said. He looked at Eleanor, who was dressed in a severe black suit, her public armor. But today, her eyes weren't cold. They were filled with a shared purpose, a quiet trust that felt more valuable than any stock price. The ballroom was a coliseum of corporate power, filled with anxious shareholders and circling journalists. Eleanor stood at the podium, a picture of strained composure. In the front row, Marcus Thorne watched her, his expression a smug mask of feigned concern. He saw her as a problem he was about to solve permanently. In the back of the room, near the audiovisual booth, Leo Sterling stood unnoticed, a laptop open on a small table, his presence as unassuming as a shadow. Eleanor began her speech, her voice trembling slightly, playing her part to perfection. "I know there have been concerns about the stability of our technology and my leadership." Marcus subtly pulled out his phone. With a tap of his thumb, he sent the kill signal. For a terrifying second, the plan seemed to work too well. The lights in the ballroom flickered violently. The massive screen behind Eleanor flashed with red warning signs and lines of crashing code. A wave of panic rippled through the audience. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a triumphant smirk gracing his lips. It was over. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the chaos stopped. The lights stabilized. The screen behind Eleanor went blank for a heartbeat before a new image appeared. It wasn't a corporate logo. It was Marcus Thorne's face, projected 20 feet high, his voice echoing through the hall's speakers from a recorded video call. "It's perfect," his voice boomed. "When I trigger the virus, her entire network will collapse. The stock will be worthless. We'll buy the ashes for pennies." The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. The screen shifted, displaying encrypted emails, offshore bank transfers to the saboteur, and detailed plans for the hostile takeover. It was all there. Undeniable. Irrefutable. Marcus froze, his face draining of all color. He was exposed, ruined in the most public way imaginable. Security guards moved towards him. Eleanor's gaze swept across the astonished crowd and landed on Leo in the back. He gave her a single, reassuring nod. She turned back to the microphone, her voice no longer trembling, but ringing with cold, hard authority. It seems we had a significant security threat. Fortunately for our shareholders, we had the world's foremost expert on our proprietary systems on hand to contain it. Every head in the room turned to follow her gaze, finally seeing the quiet man in the simple work shirt, the hidden genius who had just saved an empire. In the aftermath, the story was on every news channel. The mechanic who humbled a titan, Leo Sterling, was no longer a ghost. He was a reluctant hero. Marcus Thorne was facing a mountain of federal charges, his career ending not with a bang, but with the click of handcuffs. Eleanor's company, far from collapsing, saw its stock value soar to unprecedented heights, buoyed by the tale of unbreakable security and the legendary engineer who had returned from the shadows to protect his creation. A week later, Eleanor stood in Leo's garage once more. The air was clean, the tools were neatly arranged. She held a contract, but this time it felt different. Chief Technology Officer. The contract read. It offered a staggering salary, stock options that would make him one of the wealthiest men in the country, and a corner office with a view that stretched to the ocean. Leo read it carefully and slid it back across the workbench. "Thank you, Eleanor. But this isn't me." Her face fell. "I understand. You don't want to go back to that world." "It's not that," he corrected gently. "I don't want to be an executive. I want to be an engineer. I don't want a corner office. I want a workshop. And I want to build things that help people, not just things that make a profit." He paused, then made his counteroffer. "I will come work for you, but as the head of a new division. We'll call it the Ethical Innovation Lab. No deadlines driven by marketing. No cutting corners for shareholder reports. Just a team of the best minds with the freedom to build things that last, things that are safe, things that matter." Eleanor looked at him, at his integrity, his unwavering moral clarity, and saw the kind of strength her company truly needed. It was a strength she was just beginning to find in herself. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I accept your terms, Dr. Sterling." 6 months later, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across a park. A picnic blanket was spread on the grass, occupied not by two separate worlds, but by one blended family. Leo was leaning back, reading over a proposal for a new, low-cost medical diagnostic tool, his hands clean. Eleanor, dressed in simple jeans, was on her hands and knees in a small flower patch with Mia, a smudge of dark, rich soil on her cheek. Her perfectly manicured nails were a thing of the past. She laughed, a sound that was now easy and frequent, as Mia proudly showed her a ladybug crawling on a leaf. They were no longer the CEO and the mechanic. They were Eleanor and Leo. Their two worlds, one of sterile power and one of authentic grit, had met and created something new, something whole. They had repaired more than just a broken engine. They had repaired the broken parts of their own lives, building a future together on a foundation of trust, respect, and shared purpose. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been judged by the state of your hands instead of the content of your character? Leo's story is a powerful reminder that true worth is not measured in status or wealth, but in the integrity we carry, the skills we cultivate, and the love we share with others. It teaches us that even the most broken systems and the most guarded hearts can be repaired by the right touch. Share this story if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance to show the world who they